Welcome to PandaAudioBooks, the perfect place for a huge collection of fantasy novels. If you enjoy my content and want to support my work, a small contribution via PayPal is greatly appreciated. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit the notifications bell to stay updated with our latest audiobook chapters. Chapter 96, Fighting Ghostfang. The South Bank was shaken. All of the disciples who actually knew Bai Xiaochun felt like they suddenly didn't recognize the person standing there in front of them. He seemed like a stranger. The Bai Xiaochun they remembered loved to make people call him Sect Uncle Bai. He was a somewhat annoying person who made everyone feel like giving him a good beating. This person was completely different. Gasps could be heard coming from the North Bank audience. The disciples there stared blankly, and their minds spun. Although they hadn't known Bai Xiaochun for very long, he had already given them the impression that he was completely shameless. In sharp contrast, the person they were looking at now left them shaken to the core. Up on the balcony, Jing Yuandong's eyes shone with an extraordinary gleam. The other peak lords had very serious expressions on their faces, and Li Qinghu looked on with a slight smile. A warm feeling filled his heart, along with a sensation of pride. All the other elders were also looking on with serious looks in their eyes. Xianxia Qianyu flew through the air a bit above the arena floor, coughing up blood, a blank look in his eyes. He couldn't believe that he was losing, and of all people, to Bai Xiaochun, whom he held in complete contempt. He had been injured, but the humiliation he felt exceeded the pain of his wounds. Just as he was about to fly off of the arena floor, he let out a powerful shout. "This battle isn't over yet, Bai Xiaochun." With that, he bit his tongue and spit out a mouthful of blood. His hair instantly withered, and at the same time, he performed a double-handed incantation gesture. A moment later, he trembled as a blood-colored light shot out from the top of his head. The light surged up high above him, where it transformed into a blood sword. Numerous disciples in the audience instantly recognized what they were looking at. One of the 10 secret magics. True Self Sword. Hell Fiend Formation. Xianxia Qianyu's hands blurred as he performed another incantation gesture, then waved his finger toward Bai Xiaochun. Instantly, the blood sword transformed into countless strands of blood that swirled out to become a net of swords, which then shot toward Bai Xiaochun with an ear-piercing whistling sound. Bai Xiaochun simply extended his right hand and pointed out with his index finger. Up ahead of him, the air distorted as an enormous cauldron appeared. Although it was illusory, it seemed close to being corporeal. The complex designs which covered its surface were clearly visible, making it seem very realistic. Violet Qi Cauldron Summoning. Heavens! It's so realistic. That's not an ordinary Violet Qi Cauldron Summoning, that's the second level. Cries of astonishment could be heard coming from the South Bank audience, especially the disciples from Violet Cauldron Peak. Gasps could also be heard from the North Bank audience as the Violet Cauldron and the blood-colored sword formation slammed into each other, causing a deafening boom to fill the air. Xianxia Qianyu let out a miserable shriek as he was sent spinning backward, blood spraying out of his mouth. Bai Xiaochun's expression was the same as ever as he stood there on the arena floor, watching the enormous cauldron fade away. At the same time, Ghostfang's eyes suddenly began to gleam, and without another word, he flew over to stand across from Bai Xiaochun. "Xianxia Qianyu is too weak to fight any longer," he said. "Let's make things simple, and fight right now." Even as the words left his mouth, black mist began to pulse out around him, swirling into the form of numerous vicious ghosts who let out soundless shrieks. The ghosts were completely vicious in appearance. Some had disheveled hair, some had green skin, and some looked like rotting corpses. There were even some that carried their own heads in their arms. They were terrifying to the extreme. The entire arena floor began to fill with an aura of death, causing hearts to grow cold among the disciples of both banks. As that happened, numerous figures flew out of the crowd on both sides, people with very serious expressions on their faces. They weren't outer sect disciples, but rather, inner sect disciples from both the south and north banks who were extremely interested in the final match of the chosen battles. Even the divine sense of the prime elders atop Mount Dao Seed was completely focused on the arena floor. All eyes were glued on Bai Xiaochun and Ghostfang. Bai Xiaochun slowly turned to face Ghostfang, his expression serious. He had seen Ghostfang fight several times during the chosen battles, and each time had been astonishing. A single wave of his finger had almost killed Lu Qianlei, and that had been only 70% of his power. It was hard to imagine what it would be like if he unleashed all of his battle prowess. In the moment that Bai Xiaochun looked over at Ghostfang, Ghostfang's eyes flickered with a mysterious light. Then he waved his finger at Bai Xiaochun, causing rumbling sounds to fill heaven and earth. A gigantic clawed ghost hand appeared next to Ghostfang, filling half of the arena floor. Surging with astonishing levels of power, it rocketed toward Bai Xiaochun. In the blink of an eye, it was upon him. Bai Xiaochun clenched his right hand into a fist, and silver light flashed, making him look like a silver statue. Then he struck out toward the incoming clawed ghost hand. From a distance, Bai Xiaochun's slight frame seemed completely insignificant compared to the shocking clawed ghost hand. And yet, as soon as his fist made contact with it, an ear-splitting blast exploded out. Boom! The thunderous explosion caused disciples on both sides of the arena to tumble backward, astonished expressions on their faces. Some of them even saw stars swimming in their eyes. As the shockwave spread out from the contact point, the clawed ghost hand trembled. Cracking sounds rang out, and fissures spread out to fill its entire surface. One breath of time passed, and then the gigantic clawed ghost hand shattered into countless pieces. Black mist exploded out in all directions, and the entire arena floor shook violently. Ghostfang's eyes shone brightly as he fell back a single pace before slamming his foot down to stop himself. Cracks spread out in the ground from the foot he stomped down. As for Bai Xiaochun, he also fell back a single pace, his face flushed, his hand glittering with silver light. If you looked closely at that hand, it was possible to see it trembling slightly. The surrounding disciples gasped, and both sides of the arena immediately burst forth with cries of shock and astonishment. I can't believe. Bai Xiaochun is so strong. He's actually at the same level as elder brother Ghostfang. Back when the Luo Chen clan turned traitor, I heard that he barely escaped with his life, but killed a bunch of them in the process. I thought those stories were exaggerations, but now. That's the first time I've ever seen anyone destroy Ghostfang's clawed ghost hand. The inner sect disciples were equally astonished, and all of them felt their hearts pounding with bitter astonishment as they looked at Bai Xiaochun and Ghostfang. As far as they were concerned, these two weren't even outer sect disciples anymore. Oftentimes, years would pass without a single inhuman disciple rising up from within the ranks. And yet now, two had appeared at the same time. Up on the balcony, the sect leader's eyes shone with joy, and the other elder's eyebrows were raised in shock. Bai Xiaochun frowned at the tingling sensation he felt in his hand, but the feeling soon went away. Looking over at Ghostfang, he realized that he was facing a formidable opponent. Ghostfang's eyes shone with what appeared to be happiness. I only used 50% power, but you still destroyed my finger attack. That means you're a lot stronger than anyone else I've faced. Well, in that case, I can safely use 80% power. Right hand flashing with an incantation gesture, he waved his finger again at Bai Xiaochun. Instantly, black mist swirled into being above Bai Xiaochun. The air was ripped apart as, unexpectedly, another huge ghost hand appeared. This one was even more massive than the one which had nearly killed Lu Qianlei, and caused rumbling sounds to echo out in all directions as it descended toward Bai Xiaochun like a mountain. Bai Xiaochun looked up, clenched his right hand into a fist, and then launched into the air, turning into a bright beam of light that shot directly toward the clawed ghost hand. Silver light spread out in all directions as the power of his fist caused heaven and earth to shake. Bai Xiaochun's undying skin erupted with power, causing the ghost hand to tremble, and then begin to break apart just like the previous one. Ghostfang's face flickered as he performed more incantation gestures, sending a third, a fourth, and a fifth finger attack out in quick succession. In the blink of an eye, Bai Xiaochun was facing 4 enormous clawed ghost hands. Although all of this takes some time to describe, It happened in the briefest of instants. As the four ghost hands bore down on Bai Xiaochun, the outer sect disciples cried out in alarm, and even the inner sect disciples were left completely shaken. On the balcony, the sect leader and the others shot to their feet, and Li Qingho's eyes glittered. However, a moment later, they all realized that there was no need to intervene and rescue Bai Xiaochun. In the time it takes a spark to fly off of a piece of flint, a huge boom echoed out as the ghost hands all landed on Bai Xiaochun, and the arena floor was reduced to nothing more than dust. The resultant cloud of dust that filled the air obscured Bai Xiaochun. However, a moment later, a flicker like that of lightning could be seen in the dust as a figure shot out at top speed toward Ghostfang. Throat-crushing grasp. The only thing that could be seen was flickering, silver light. Then, two fingers appeared directly in front of Ghostfang, filling him with an intense sensation of deadly crisis, the likes of which he had never felt before. He let out a hoarse shout, causing mist to surge up around him in the form of a defensive shield. At the same time, he fell back in retreat. However, at that very moment, a powerful gravitational force erupted from Bai Xiaochun's two fingers. Not only was Ghostfang prevented from retreating, he was actually pulled toward the fingers. When his defensive shield made contact with the fingers, it was crushed in the briefest of moments. None of his subsequent defensive measures did anything, not even the 3 bucklers he summoned. The first was instantly shattered, the second cracked into 2 pieces, and the third, despite remaining whole, was sent spinning away. Chapter 97. I am Big Fatty Jong. As of this moment, all of the disciples in the audience were staring blankly at the arena floor, their minds spinning, tsunamis of shock battering their hearts. The South Bank audience were thunderstruck. It was only in this moment that they finally realized why it was that Bai Xiaochun had managed to survive his fight with the Luochen clan, and why he had been named a prestige disciple. He's actually so strong. That was what all of the shocked disciples were thinking. As for the North Bank audience, their minds were in shambles. Up on the balcony, the various elders all had bright gleams in their eyes as they mentally replayed the moment in which Bai Xiaochun struck that incredible blow, and the silver light which covered him. That's the undying live forever technique. He's reached the silver level. That final blow was the throat-crushing grasp. I can't believe that someone actually succeeded in cultivating the undying live forever technique. It's virtually impossible. It's an extraordinary technique, but sadly, its origins are a complete mystery, and furthermore, our version is incomplete. I very much look forward to seeing if one of these two end up in the legacy echelon years from now. The sect leader sighed. Such an event would only come after many years had passed. Reaching the legacy echelon was a very, very difficult matter. Even the mere thought of it caused him to look over at Li Qinghu. Reach the gold core stage within 2 60-year cycles, and that puts you in the legacy echelon, he thought. Our only hope for this generation is Li Qinghu. Back on the arena floor, Ghostfang waved his hand, causing a green light to flow out, which transformed into an enormous greenwood banner, which he stuck into the ground next to him. Then he sat down cross-legged, his eyes shining with the desire to fight. Bai Xiaochun, you are worthy. I will now open my seals. First level seal, open. With that, his right hand flashed with an incantation gesture, and he pushed his finger down onto his forehead. A droning sound could be heard, and he trembled visibly as numerous streams of black light exploded out from inside of him. As they swirled around, he grew slightly larger, and a powerful aura erupted out, an aura which reached well into the foundation establishment stage. 6th finger, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th. Roaring, he waved his finger at Bai Xiaochun 5 times in a row, each time unleashing greater power than before. Heaven and earth trembled as 5 gigantic ghost hands began to descend from above, radiating shocking levels of energy. Gasps could be heard from the audience. Is that still a chi condensation magical technique? It looks like something from Foundation Establishment. This is the first time I've seen a chi condensation disciple unleash magic as shocking as that. Only some type of secret magic could do such a thing. All secret magics in the spirit stream sect can be used to some extent in the qi condensation stage. Bai Xiaochun's pupils constricted. The pressure he felt from Ghostfang now felt even greater than before, and even beyond what he had faced in his fight with the crown prince of the Luochen clan. Of course, this was not a battle to the death. Back in his fight with the Luochen clan, his life had been on the line. Although he wasn't fighting for his life right now, he still didn't want to lose. If there was no chance for him to take first place, then he wouldn't even try, but now that first place was in sight, he wanted it. Not for the supposed reputation it would earn him, but because of the approval he knew he would see in Li Qingho's eyes. That was enough of a reason for him. Eyes bloodshot, he waved his sleeve and performed an incantation gesture. Spiritual power surged within him, and a violet cauldron appeared. Then a second, a third, until 5 cauldrons hovered around him. In the blink of an eye, 5 violet cauldrons materialized and shot toward the 5 clawed ghost hands. Simultaneously, the golden crow sword appeared in a streak of golden light, summoning the golden crow, which let out a piercing cry as it shot toward Ghostfang. At the same time, Bai Xiaochun shot forward, ignoring the ghost hands as he closed in on Ghostfang himself. A boom rang out as the 5 violet cauldrons slammed into the 5 ghost hands. The cauldrons shattered. As for the clawed ghost hands, they faded a bit, but continued to close in on Bai Xiaochun at top speed. Then rumbling could be heard as the divine crane shield appeared, and an enormous crane materialized around Bai Xiaochun. When the ghost hands slammed into it, cracking sounds could be heard as they faded even more. The crane let out a piercing shriek, vanishing and returning to the shield itself, incapable of providing any further defense. The 5 ghost hands proceeded unhindered to slam into Bai Xiaochun. However, just before they touched him, black light spread out and covered him, the result of the life-saving magic given to him by Li Qinghu. When the clawed ghost hands hit the black light, they couldn't stand up to its power. Deafening booms rang out as they were destroyed. Bai Xiaochun coughed up a mouthful of blood, and yet, suffered no other injuries. The black light faded, and Bai Xiaochun's eyes flickered as he closed in on Ghostfang with the golden crow sword. By this point, he was a mere 15 meters away, and the golden crow sword was only 3 meters from Ghostfang. Ghostfang's face flickered as he grabbed his greenwood banner and leaped backward. The golden crow sword sped past his shoulder, slicing a wound open as it passed. Blood sprayed out, but Ghostfang ignored the pain. Hair disheveled and eyes bloodshot, he waved the banner and said, "Second level seal, open. 10 ghosts. Haunt the night." Terrifying howling noises rose up from the greenwood banner as 2 scaled ghost arms ripped the banner open. Out stepped a vicious green ghost with a long horn sticking out of its head and a ferocious grin on its face. The sky suddenly darkened as sinister black clouds roiled into existence, almost as if night had fallen. More vicious ghosts emerged from within the banner, a total of 10. Each one was bursting with energy equivalent to the great circle of qi condensation. As they began to charge Bai Xiaochun, his face flickered, and his heart began to pound. Even if he was stronger than his current level, there was no way he could fight 10 ghosts who had battle prowess equivalent to the great circle of qi condensation. Ghostfang breathed a sigh of relief. He couldn't keep his second seal open for too long, and knew that all of his hopes for victory rested with these 10 ghosts. He stood there behind them, eyeing Bai Xiaochun coldly. The battle between these two had been like a fight between a dragon and a tiger, and provoked cries of alarm and surprise from the audience. Now everyone could see exactly how powerful Ghostfang was, and the North Bank audience was in high spirits. As for the South Bank disciples, they were starting to get very nervous. Bai Xiaochun was in full retreat as the 10 ghosts spread out to surround him. Their cultivation bases were shocking, so powerful that not even the golden crow sword could defend against them. 10 ghosts haunt the night. Suddenly, he looked up into the sky at the black clouds that made everything seem like night. Eyes flickering thoughtfully, his right hand flashed with an incantation gesture, and the golden crow sword shot up toward the clouds. Apparently, Bai Xiaochun wanted to slash the clouds open so that the arena floor was no longer covered in night. Ghostfang frowned slightly in response to Bai Xiaochun's quick reaction. The best time to use this divine ability of his was at night, when it was virtually invincible. During the daytime, it was definitely possible to break it, unless he unleashed the 100 Ghosts level. That cloud cover is beyond ordinary, Ghostfang thought with a cold smile. Only spirit-enhanced treasures could possibly break it. Even if Bai Xiaochun finds a weakness, he's definitely not strong enough to pierce it open. It was at that point that the golden crow sword pierced into the clouds, and rumbling echoed out. The clouds seemed to weaken, but strangely, sucked in the golden crow sword, making it impossible to use again. Getting nervous, Bai Xiaochun fell back again and pulled out 2 spirit-enhanced flying swords. After sending them shooting up, they were also sucked into the clouds, although the clouds weakened further in the process. Ghostfang's jaw dropped. Spirit-enhanced treasures. Next, before Ghostfang could even react, Bai Xiaochun suddenly produced 8 more flying swords, all of which glittered with silver light as they shot up into the sky. Each and every one had a 2-fold spirit enhancement, and when they pierced into the cloud cover, it was weakened so much that rays of sunlight began to shine down, which caused the 10 ghosts to shriek and dodge to the side. Ghostfang's eyes went wide, and despite his level of willpower, couldn't help but let out a cry of shock. So many. Damn it, he can't have more than that, can he? He wasn't the only person to react in such a way. The outer sect disciples from both the south and north banks all looked on with disbelieving eyes, and began to shout aloud. Heavens! How many spirit-enhanced items does Bai Xiaochun have? Most disciples have trouble getting their hands on a single one. But he has so many. Who enhanced them for him? As people shouted out in surprise, Big Fatty Zhong was there in the crowd. However, he was more toward the back, and although he had been cheering for Bai Xiaochun, nobody had really paid any attention to him. Now that he saw Bai Xiaochun using all of the flying swords, he lifted his chin loftily and said, "All of them were enhanced by me, Big Fatty Zhong." Even as Ghostfang tried to convince himself that Bai Xiaochun couldn't possibly have any more spirit-enhanced items, Bai Xiaochun was delighted to discover that his swords were actually affecting the cloud cover. Immediately, he began to laugh out loud, and then produced 2 more flying swords. Silver light flashed as the spirit-enhanced swords shot toward the clouds. Impossible! Ghostfang shouted in shock. Rumbling sounds emanated from the clouds, which could not stand up to so many attacks by spirit-enhanced swords. As sunlight spilled down, the 10 ghosts screamed shrilly as they retreated back into the banner. As that happened, Bai Xiaochun laughed heartily and began to close in on Ghostfang, building up power to unleash the throat-crushing grasp again. An extremely unsightly expression appeared on Ghostfang's face. Just as he was about to fight back, blood sprayed out of his mouth, and he trembled. The side effects of opening his second seal were now beginning to affect him. An unyielding expression on his face, he began to fall back as fast as possible. "I concede," he said through gritted teeth. He knew that in his current state, he wasn't a match for Bai Xiaochun. Even still, he refused to acknowledge that he had truly been defeated. If Bai Xiaochun hadn't possessed so many spirit-enhanced treasures, he would never have been able to defeat Ghosts Haunt the Night. Furthermore, if they had actually been fighting at night, he would have been defeated even more handily. In the moment that Ghostfang conceded, the shocked disciples of the South Bank immediately broke out into excited cheering. "We won! The South Bank won! Ha ha ha! We took first place! We got 2 people into the top 3! We've gotten our revenge! Sect Uncle Bai is invincible!" The South Bank disciples were cheering up a storm, while the North Bank disciples looked on bitterly. They could all see that the problem wasn't Ghostfang being weak, it was Bai Xiaochun having too many treasures. "How come you have so many spirit-enhanced treasures, Bai Xiaochun?" Ghostfang asked, wanting to know why he had been defeated in such a way. "My elder brother Big Fatty Zhong is a spirit enhancement genius," Bai Xiaochun responded proudly. "The kind you only see once in 1,000, no, once in 10,000 years. All of those treasures I used were gifts from him. If you want to assign blame, blame the fact that my elder brother is a genius of spirit enhancement." The South Bank disciples cried out in shock, with the commotion being especially loud among the Violet Cauldron Peak disciples. "Big Fatty Zhong? Who is this godlike individual? Big Fatty Zhong. He's a Violet Cauldron Peak disciple. He's the apprentice of the Peak Lord. Heavens, He usually keeps such a low profile. Who could ever have guessed that he was so incredible? Excited, Big Fatty Jong threw his head back and roared at the top of his lungs, "I am Big Fatty Jong. All of the flying swords used by Xiaochun were enhanced by me." Big Fatty Jong's excited words echoed out for everyone to hear. Even the sect leader and the others on the balcony turned to look at him curiously. As pandemonium continued to grip the crowd, Xiaochun stood there blinking. Finally, he lifted his chin and waved his sleeve, looking like the ultimate hero. Turning slowly, he walked off of the arena floor. Life is a lonely thing. With the snap of a finger, I reduced all the chosen to ashes. Chapter 98. Dragon Mammoth Sea-Forming Scripture. The chosen battles had caused many eyes to be focused on Big Fatty Jong, even those of the sect leader. "The power of will," he said, expression very serious. The other peak lords looked surprised, and their eyes began to shine. Xu Meixiang had taken Lu Qianlei away to begin treating his injuries, but if she were present, she would have been incredulous. Sounding very happy, the sect leader said, "Junior sister Meixiang rarely takes this chubby kid out in public. But now his future prospects are clear. His spirit enhancement has developed his will. With a strong will and a strong spirit, this kid is the kind that must be trained well." The Peak Lord from Green Crest Peak smiled and said, "Now that you mention it, his friend, that girl who also came from the ovens, Qingru, is actually quite impressive. She might not measure up to Qianyu, but she has her own special destiny. She seems connected to Green Crest Peak's mountain defense sword. She's currently seeking enlightenment in Green Crest Cave, and if things go well, Green Crest Peak will soon have another spirit sword guardian." As the South Bank audience went wild, the North Bank disciples simply sat there silently while the sect leader formally announced the results. Xiaochun had taken first place in the joint South and North Bank chosen battles. He would now join the inner sect. As a reward, he could visit Heavenhorn Pavilion on Mount Dao Seed to select a precious treasure of the Qi condensation level. Furthermore, he would be given the chance to enter the Spirit Stream Sect's arcane pocket realm, where he could gain enlightenment of a divine ability. Of course, to take advantage of such an opportunity in the Qi condensation stage would be a bit of a waste. Any disciple who took first place in the chosen battles would almost certainly reach Foundation establishment. That would be the time to use such a chance. The final reward was a prize of 10,000 spirit stones. Next, Zheng Yuandong formally bestowed the top 10 disciples with the title of chosen, and promoted them into the inner sect. Gradually, the crowds began to depart. The North Bank disciples weren't very happy, but the South Bank disciples were bursting with excitement. As for the chosen, they had mixed expressions on their faces. Ghostfang watched Xiaochun walk off, and sighed. Deep in his heart, he still didn't believe himself to have truly lost. As for the other North Bank chosen such as the Gongsun siblings and Shusong, they left with clenched fists, all of them intent on returning to their respective mountain peaks and going into secluded meditation. Zhu Xinqi still had a hard time believing what she had seen, and looked a bit puzzled as she watched Xiaochun leaving. Even more incredulous than her was Shangguan Qianyu. He stood there despondently, ignored by virtually everyone. His underhanded attack on Xiaochun was something that would forever be etched into the hearts of the South Bank disciples. Chuckling bitterly, he clenched his hands into fists. "We're only in Qi condensation. Just wait until Foundation establishment. I'll definitely be number one in that stage. I'll outdo Xiaochun and Ghostfang both." Filled with determination, he held his head high with pride as he shot off in a beam of light. Gradually, everyone left the arena. The chosen battles were over. However, the true fight between all the chosen had only just begun. Everyone on both the South and North Bank knew Xiaochun's name, although on the North Bank, it became a taboo word. He was the archenemy of the North Bank, a shameless villain who had brought humiliation to all the disciples there. That was especially true of Beihan Lai. After being taken away by his master, he immediately went into secluded meditation, not daring to show his face in public. As for his huge dog, he released it somewhere on the North Bank, relinquishing ownership of it for all time. Although the Night Stalker beast was extraordinary, nobody could control it, and soon it became like a wild dog. Occasionally, people would catch glimpses of it roaming around near the 4 mountain peaks of the North Bank. Countless North Bank disciples went back and madly devoted themselves to cultivation. All of them swore oaths that one day, they would take the stain of humiliation inflicted by Xiaochun and wash it clean with blood. The disciples even formed an organization called the Slay Xiaochun Society, which was devoted to eradicating Xiaochun. Because of what had occurred in the chosen battles, Big Fatty Zhong became incredibly famous. Everyone was completely shocked by the sheer number of spirit-enhanced treasures of his that Xiaochun had used in his final fight with Ghostfang. Big Fatty Zhong became a chosen on Violet Cauldron Peak, and soon, countless disciples began to visit him, hoping to become friends and thus have access to spirit-enhanced items. Big Fatty Zhong was very pleased by this, but didn't let it show. He wouldn't perform spirit enhancements for just anyone. Of course, the more he acted like that, the more people fawned over him. Eventually Xu Meixiang called him over to make a detailed inquiry. She almost couldn't believe what she heard, and was even more shocked to sense the power of will within him. In the end, she forbade him from performing spirit enhancements for anyone else, at least not until he could perform a 5-fold spirit enhancement for Xiaochun. Big Fatty Zhong found that a bit odd, but nodded in agreement nonetheless. Spirit enhancement is the most mysterious of arts, she thought. Perhaps Xiaochun and Big Fatty Zhong have some special connection. If they help each other, the results could be shocking. Xu Meixiang watched thoughtfully as Big Fatty Zhong left. She didn't look into the matter any further. In the Spirit Stream sect, everyone had their own destiny, and greedily attempting to take advantage of others could harm the foundation of the sect. Such actions were strictly forbidden. Besides, Xiaochun had a unique status that made him especially difficult to deal with. The Spirit Stream sect had remained strong for 10,000 years, and one of the reasons was that hard and fast rule. A few days later, Xiaochun got his inner sect uniform and command medallion. Furthermore, he received orders from Elder Shu, who led the inner sect on Fragrant Cloud Peak, to pack his bags and leave the courtyard residence that had been his home for the past few years. Inner sect disciples all received Immortals Caves filled with strong spiritual energy. The so-called Immortals Caves were like heavenly abodes that were worlds unto their own. Having taken first place in the chosen battles, Xiaochun had his pick of the available Immortals Caves, and naturally, he picked the best one. It was on the rear side of Fragrant Cloud Peak, at the end of a narrow little path, a quiet place filled with strong spiritual energy. The cave itself had 5 rooms, with night pearls inlaid in the ceilings that filled the place with soft light. There was a large main hall with a little hot spring in the middle. Warm water bubbled up, forming a small pond, within which a few hot spring fish swam lazily about. The Immortals Cave was simple but impressive. It had a medicine concocting workshop, secluded meditation facilities, a spirit plant nursery, and a place set aside for practicing magics. Also included were 2 puppets with cultivation bases equivalent to the 5th level of Qi condensation, who cared for day-to-day affairs for Xiaochun. Every room in the Immortals Cave had a spell formation, as did the main hall. Once activated, the stone walls and ceilings would vanish to reveal an image of the sky above. At night, it was even possible to see the moon and the stars. There was a larger spell formation that covered the entire Immortals Cave, and once activated, not even an early Foundation establishment cultivator would be able to break in. This Immortals Cave would even be suitable for a Foundation establishment cultivator, and in fact, it was one of the nicest in all of Fragrant Cloud Peak. Xiaochun looked very pleased, and his heart nearly burst with joy. Now that he thought about it, his previous courtyard residence had been far too simple and crude. As he saw Elder Shu off, Elder Shu repeatedly reminded him to go to the Inner Sect Spirit Pavilion to find the technique Li Qinghu had suggested for him. Finally, Elder Shu left. After he was sure Elder Shu was gone, Xiaochun stripped naked and jumped into the pond, where he floated there, sighing contentedly. Occasionally a fish would float by and nibble a bit on his skin. It was a feeling the likes of which he had never experienced before in his life. It's too bad Du Lingfei isn't here in the sect. Having her here to bathe with would be great. Sighing, he thought of Hu Xiaomai, and then smiled radiantly. As of that moment, He vowed to find an opportunity to get her to come over and join him in the hot spring to look at the stars. After some deep thought, he came to the conclusion that his previous way of thinking had been far too limited. As a man of ambition, I should get Hu Xiaomai and Du Lingfei to come join me in the hot spring at the same time. The next morning, Bai Xiaoqun woke early and left his immortal's cave. Strolling along the little mountain path, he noticed another immortal's cave not too far off. It was only a few meters away, located almost directly across from his own. It had its spell formation activated, and appeared to be occupied. Bai Xiaoqun studied it curiously for a few minutes before looking away. As he strolled along, he realized that there weren't any outer sect disciples to be seen, only a few inner sect disciples. Most people weren't out and about, but rather secluded in meditation. The only time they would come out would be to go on sect missions. Of course, whenever Bai Xiaoqun did see someone, he would clear his throat and strike a pose. After looking shocked for a moment, the inner sect disciple would inevitably greet him as Sect Uncle Bai. Being addressed in such a manner as he went along lifted his spirits. He swaggered along through fragrant Cloud Peak until he reached the inner sect's spirit pavilion. That was a location where the inner sect disciples practiced their various techniques and abilities. Whenever a disciple was promoted to the inner sect, they would be able to acquire one of the sect's techniques at no cost. As soon as Bai Xiaoqun arrived, the disciple in charge clasped hands in greeting. Feeling more pleased than ever, Bai Xiaoqun clapped his shoulder and then went to look at the options he had in terms of techniques. Sever heaven and earth. Water flame theorem. 9 heavens earth destruction incantation. After examining the options available, the techniques started to blur together, and he had no idea which one he should pick. They all seemed incredible. Eventually, he found the technique Li Qinghu had suggested that he cultivate. Dragon Mammoth Sea-forming scripture. He picked up the jade slip and sent some spiritual power into it. After examining the introduction, his eyes went wide, and his scalp began to tingle. Everyone is bound by shackles. Whether in terms of cultivation base or the fleshly body, there are life essence shackles which cannot be broken. I have created this technique, suitable for cultivation in the qi condensation stage, not to break through the shackles, but to gain enlightenment of them. Bai Xiaoqun took a deep breath and thought back to the black-robed man who had saved his life, the one who called himself the Gravekeeper. The words in the introduction of this scripture reminded him of the words that man had spoken. The 5 volumes of the Undying Codex. Break through the 5 shackles of mortality. The 5 volumes of the Live Forever Codex. Break through the 5 seals of eternity. He suddenly had the feeling that this dragon mammoth sea-forming scripture was anything but ordinary. However, after further examination, he frowned. Based on the description, there didn't seem to be anything particularly astonishing about it. In fact, it didn't even seem to measure up to some of the other powerful magical techniques he'd just looked at. After a moment though, his expression brightened as he realized that it dovetailed perfectly with the Violet Qi Cauldron control art, and also increased the chances of reaching foundation establishment. Bai Xiaoqun had been dreaming of reaching foundation establishment for years now, and merely thinking about it would leave his heart pounding. The Dragon Mammoth Sea-forming scripture only had 3 levels. The first led to the 9th level of qi condensation, the second led to the Great Circle of the 10th level of qi condensation. The final level led to foundation establishment. At the pinnacle, the fleshly body would have the strength of dragons and mammoths, and one's spiritual power would form a huge sea. Best of all was that after creating such a matchless foundation, once one reached foundation establishment, it would be much easier to learn just about any divine ability, without worrying about an incompatibility problem. It was something extraordinary within the ordinary. This is the one for me. Whether because of the fact that the introduction mentioned shackles, or that the scripture could help him reach foundation establishment, it left Bai Xiaoqun's heart pounding. Dragon Mammoth Sea-forming scripture in hand, he left the inner sect spirit pavilion and headed back toward his immortal's cave. Just when he was almost there, the gate of the immortal's cave across from him opened, and a young woman walked out. As soon as she saw him, her jaw dropped, and she tried to duck back inside, but wasn't fast enough. Sect niece Xianxia. He was immediately elated. Ever since the chosen battles, Xianxia had kept her distance from him. He'd wanted to get her to address him as sect uncle, but had never found the chance. Who would have thought that he was now living right across from her? Chapter 99. Knock Knock. An unsightly expression appeared on Xianxia's face. Never had she imagined that she would pick the Immortals' cave right across from Bai Xiaochun's. She was well aware that back in the outer sect, Bai Xiaochun had loved to go around making everyone call him sect uncle. Unable to stomach the thought, she'd always avoided him. But now here he was, standing right in her path. Taking a deep breath, she coolly said, "Sect Uncle Bai." Then, without so much as looking at him, she leapt onto her blue flying silk and flew up into the air. Her beauty made her seem almost like a female immortal, and so she often flew around in this fashion to avoid the toadies and sycophants. It was because such behavior that she seemed relatively distant and unapproachable. Bai Xiaochun happily tucked his hands behind his back like a member of the senior generation as he watched Xianxia fly away. He didn't mind her attitude, all he wanted was to be called Sect Uncle Bai. After she left, he returned to his own Immortal's cave, feeling very much like he had reached a milestone on this day. Back inside, he pulled out the Dragon Mammoth Sea-forming scripture and began to take a closer look. As he did, he thought back to how powerful Ghostfang had been in their fight, and suddenly his expression turned very serious. How does Ghostfang practice cultivation anyway? He's so incredible. Especially those ghosts of his. He controls them almost like battle beasts. It sure would be great if I could have a beast of my own. Thinking back to the fight, the lingering fear caused his heart to tremble. Suddenly, he remembered something, and slapped his bag of holding to produce a wooden box. The beast birth seed. If I ever have a chance to go to the North Bank, then maybe I could get a beast of my very own. Furthermore, such a beast would have been created by me and me alone. After thinking about the miraculous beast birth seed, his heart began to pound in excitement. A long moment passed, and then he shook his head. Suppressing his excitement, he put the box away. I hate fighting and killing more than anything else. I need to focus on getting to the great circle of qi condensation as soon as possible. That way I can step into foundation establishment. With those thoughts on his mind, Bai Xiaochun set to work cultivating the Dragon Mammoth Sea-forming scripture. Although the Dragon Mammoth Sea-forming scripture could be used to perfect the Violet Qi Cauldron control art, their cultivation techniques were completely different. Instead of depicting various postures to assume, the description in the scripture had 3 illustrations. The first depicted an enormous, prime Val mammoth. It seemed preeminently powerful, strong enough to crush a mountain. The idea of such incredible fleshly body power left Bai Xiaochun immediately shaken. All of his flesh and blood seemed to thrum just from the picture alone, as if it possessed a strange power of its own. The second illustration depicted an azure dragon, twisting and turning among the clouds, which partially obscured it. When Bai Xiaochun looked at it, it seemed to brand itself into his mind. All of a sudden, he could picture the image mentally. And yet, as soon as that happened, the image faded away, and his mind filled with rumbling sounds. At the same time, the spiritual power in his body seemed to surge out of control, swirling through him painfully. He took back control, and a cold sweat broke out all over him. What kind of cultivation technique is this? Taking a deep breath, he declined to look at the third illustration. Instead, he went back to re-examine the Dragon Mammoth Sea-forming scripture mnemonic. After a bit of time, he looked up, his eyes flickering with enlightenment. Cultivation via visualization, he murmured. It was a very mysterious form of cultivation. According to the level one had reached, one would observe various illustrations, and thus cultivate oneself. Presumably, the 3 illustrations contained some mysterious energy of heaven and earth that would affect the body upon observing them. To a disciple who had just joined the sect, such a method would not be very suitable for cultivation. Furthermore, attempting it would surely be harmful to the body. But after reaching the 8th level of qi condensation, and having built up a significant amount of spiritual power, it would then be possible to cultivate it. After pondering for a bit, Bai Xiaochun decided not to set his aims too high. He started with the first illustration, looking at it until he began to tremble visibly, and his qi and blood were flowing at top speed. As he did, his skin began to shine with silver light because of his undying skin. Gradually, Bai Xiaochun got the feeling that when combined with his undying skin, the dragon mammoth sea-forming scripture could make him significantly stronger. Time went by. During the half-month which passed, Bai Xiaochun occasionally concocted some medicine while simultaneously cultivating the dragon mammoth sea-forming scripture. Slowly but surely, his cultivation grew. Furthermore, the silver color of his undying skin grew deeper. Clearly, he was making progress with both. Soon, he realized that because of the dragon mammoth sea-forming scripture, he didn't even need to cultivate his violet qi cauldron control art to improve his violet qi cauldron summoning. It was naturally advancing by leaps and bounds. Bai Xiaochun was shocked by this, but after thinking about it for a while, came to a conclusion about what was happening. The dragon mammoth sea-forming scripture is a utility technique. With its help, all other divine abilities and magical techniques can become much more formidable. As for the shackles that the introduction mentioned, after some more thought, he waved his finger, causing an illusory violet cauldron to appear. It looked very realistic, was larger than the cauldrons from before, and exerted formidable pressure. Bai Xiaochun could even sense that if he wished, he could disperse the cauldron and draw the resulting spiritual power back into his body. With a thought, he did just that, and the spiritual energy rushed back inside of him, replenishing most of what he had wasted to use the divine ability. Bai Xiaochun was delighted. Being able to easily unleash and retract the cauldron was a hallmark of making significant progress with violet qi cauldron summoning. With the help of the dragon mammoth sea-forming scripture, I actually might be able to develop that human-controlling grand magic I thought of before. Even in his moment of joy, his expression suddenly flickered. Looking over at the main gate of his immortal's cave, he performed an incantation gesture and pointed out. The door faded away, becoming invisible from his perspective, allowing him to see outside. It was evening, and he could see over 100 people flying in his direction from off in the distance. There were a few dozen who were faster than the others that reached his immortal's cave first. Among the group was a young man with handsome features. Unfortunately, his face was somewhat pale, and his eyes were bloodshot, as if with madness. He seemed unstable, as if the slightest poke might cause him to rave dementedly. Bai Xiaochun immediately recognized the young man. He was none other than Beihan Lai from the North Bank. The few dozen people next to him all had cultivation bases which exceeded that of the ordinary 9th level of qi condensation. There were even 10 or so who were in the great circle of qi condensation. Shockingly, the rest of the large group which was currently catching up all were in the 9th level of qi condensation. Next to Beihan Lai was a tall, muscular man who looked like a miniature mountain. His features were very similar to Beihan Lai's, and he had long, flowing hair. He stood there next to Beihan Lai, unmoving, bursting with an energy that shocked even Bai Xiaochun. His aura seemed like something past the qi condensation stage, and he was surrounded by an invisible vortex that constantly gathered the surrounding energy of heaven and earth. Over 100 inner sect disciples, all in the 9th and 10th levels of qi condensation. Bai Xiaochun's eyes went wide, and he felt his scalp tingling. Without a moment of hesitation, he performed an incantation gesture and pointed out, fully activating the cave's spell formation. Every person in this group of over 100 were inner sect disciples. More precisely, they were from Sunset Peak, and had come here to get revenge for their junior brother Beihan Lai. The actions of this large group had attracted the attention of the inner sect disciples from Fragrant Cloud Peak. Xianxia was the first to emerge from her own immortal's cave, and soon, large numbers of inner sect disciples were flying over from different locations. As they surrounded the group of 100, people soon recognized the burly man standing next to Beihan Lai. Spiritual energy transformed into a vortex. That's an energy which exceeds qi condensation. That's close to foundation establishment. He's half a step into foundation establishment. That's the #1 inner sect disciple from Sunset Peak, Beihan Feng. As everyone cried out in surprise and alarm, Bai Xiaochun sat there inside his immortal's cave, listening in with the aid of the spell formation. Soon, his eyes widened even further. Fellow disciples, Beihan Feng said, I can't blame the South Bank for winning the chosen battles. In fact, I offer my congratulations. My purpose in coming here today has nothing to do with matters between the South and North Banks. This is a private matter of the Beihan clan. The shameless and despicable Bai Xiaochun inflicted a wound upon my clan's junior brother that will never be healed. As his elder brother, how could I simply sit and do nothing? I have come here today to take compensation for my junior brother. Before any of the fragrant Cloud Peak inner sect disciples could even respond, he looked over at Bai Xiaochun's Immortal's Cave. Bai Xiaochun, get the hell out here right now. Off to the side, tears appeared to be welling up in Beihan Lai's bloodshot eyes. Staring at Bai Xiaochun's Immortal's Cave, he screamed hysterically, Bai Xiaochun, get your ass out here. After the Beihan brothers' words faded away, Bai Xiaochun spoke, sounding very wronged. You people are so unreasonable. I gave you a chance to concede, didn't I? You can't blame me. When that big dog pounced on you, I even thought of trying to separate you two. Shut you Bai Xiaochun. Beihan Lai shrieked. Get out here right now. My differences with you are irreconcilable. It was as if Bai Xiaochun had just opened up old wounds. Beihan Lai looked insane as he charged forward and slammed into the Immortal's Cave spell formation, seemingly intent on venting all of his pent-up anger right then and there. Bai Xiaochun's heart trembled in fear, but when he saw that the surface of the spell formation simply rippled a bit, and clearly wasn't even close to breaking, he calmed down a bit. Vowing not to go out, he looked at the maddened Beihan Lai and sighed. Beihan Lai, he called out. Listen, it's really not that big of a deal. Think about it. Now that you and that big dog have a much closer relationship, you could say that you've profited from disaster. Your beast-controlling magic will probably be much more incredible from here on out. Bai Xiaochun really did want to comfort Beihan Lai, and yet, before he could even finish speaking, Beihan Lai exploded in fury. Beihan Feng's face turned grim, and he took a step forward and smashed his palm into the spell formation. The formation trembled, and Bai Xiaochun's heart began to pound. By this point, the fragrant Cloud Peak inner sect disciples couldn't stand idly by any longer. Although they weren't very familiar with Bai Xiaochun, if they just stood around while a bunch of Sunset Peak disciples came and did whatever they wanted, the reputation of the fragrant Cloud Peak inner sect would reach rock bottom. Stay your hand, people began to shout. The fragrant Cloud Peak inner sect disciples flew forward to interfere, but before they could reach the Immortal's Cave, the Sunset Peak disciples blocked their paths. No deadly combat broke out. All the Sunset Peak disciples had to do was block the paths of the fragrant Cloud Peak disciples long enough to give Beihan Feng some time. The situation had already reached the point where open conflict was breaking out between the disciples of two mountain peaks, which was a violation of sect rules. However, Beihan Feng didn't care. The Beihan clan was also a prestige clan, so as long as he didn't actually kill anyone, he wouldn't be punished very severely. Rumbling could be heard as the spell formation began to twist and distort, and the ripples became more intense. However, this was not an ordinary Immortal's Cave. At first, Bai Xiaochun was worried, but soon he realized that nothing more was happening, and he relaxed. However, being a good person, he really felt bad, and therefore decided to offer more advice about how to resolve the situation. You really can't blame me. How about you make dog stew out of that dog? That way everyone will know that Beihan Lai is manly and tough, and that he'll eat anyone who pounces on him. By that point, he realized that maybe he'd gone a bit too far, and was about to rein things back in when Beihan Lai coughed up a massive mouthful of blood. Hair completely disheveled, and almost completely out of his mind, he headbutted the spell formation. Bai Xiaochun's heart continued to pound in terror. Chapter 100. Still won't apologize to your sect, Uncle Bai? Bai Xiaochun felt more wronged than ever. Of course, he had long since come to the realization that whenever he needed to explain himself the most, he would go overboard and end up with egg on his face. That wasn't his intention nor his desire. Bai Xiaochun's explanation enraged Beihan Feng even further. He took a deep breath and waved his hand, causing pulses of black light to instantly form in his palm, which rapidly took the shape of a black crescent moon. It was like the moon on the darkest of nights, and pulsed with a terrifying power that caused the heart to pound. Bei Han Feng immediately shoved the moon toward the cave's spell formation. A boom echoed out, and the entire Immortal's cave trembled. The spell formation shield outside distorted madly, and even seemed to be on the verge of cracking open in several places. However, in the end, it didn't break. In the blink of an eye, it was back to normal. Even Bei Han Feng gasped. The strength of this spell formation was giving him quite a headache. Gritting his teeth in fury, he was just about to continue attacking, when all of a sudden a cold snort could be heard from off in the distance. Bei Han Feng, what are you doing? Stay your hand immediately. The voice echoed like thunder, causing everything to shake, especially around Bei Han Feng. Trembling, even Bei Han Lai ceased his ravings and fell back, heart pounding with fear. The other inner sect disciples from Sunset Peak all retreated, faces falling. Looking up, they saw 6 beams of light flying through the air toward them, coming from Mount Daoseed. The person who had just spoken was a middle-aged man, clad in a black robe. Fury filled his face, and he emanated a terrifyingly destructive aura. Bei Han Lai and Bei Han Feng both murmured, "Master." Trembling, they clasped hands in greeting, and as for all the other inner sect disciples from Sunset Peak, they trembled and bowed their heads. "Greetings, Peak Lord." The middle-aged man was none other than Bei Han Lai's master, and the Peak Lord of Sunset Peak, who had glared angrily at Bai Xiaochun when he took Bei Han Lai away from the chosen battles. "You ill-mannered curs," he shouted. "Could you lose any more face than this? Get your asses off to the side, I'll deal with you later. Everyone else, when you get back to the mountain, go into secluded meditation for 3 years as punishment." The Bei Han siblings were trembling inwardly, unsure of exactly what was happening. They knew that their actions were a violation of sect rules, but they couldn't imagine what had riled up their normally kind and gentle master. After all, back when the original incident had occurred, their master had also been furious with Bai Xiaochun. The Bei Han siblings both assumed that something else must have happened that they weren't aware of, and it left their hearts simmering with fear. Stepping back anxiously, they looked up at their master floating there in midair, and their scalps began to tingle. Next to the Peak Lord of Sunset Peak were the 3 Peak Lords from the North Bank. The Peak Lord from Iris Petal Peak, the old woman, looked especially displeased as she stared down coldly at the Sunset Peak disciples. In addition to the 4 Peak Lords from the North Bank, sect leader Zheng Yuandong was also present, as was another individual. That final individual wore a cool expression on his face, as if he didn't care at all about the dispute playing out down below. He was Peak Lord of Fragrant Cloud Peak, Li Qinghu. Sinking feelings rose up in the hearts of the Sunset Peak disciples, and as for the inner sect disciples of Fragrant Cloud Peak, they were completely taken aback. Everyone suddenly felt as if something completely odd were taking place. The truth was that the North Bank usually acted in domineering fashion. When situations similar to this had arisen in the past, and they had, the North Bank would usually put the South Bank in place quickly, even with big issues. For them to be as enraged as they were today was a rare thing. Sitting there in his Immortal's cave, Bai Xiaochun was also shocked as he stared at the crowd outside. Up in midair, the 4 North Bank Peak Lords looked around at the scene down below. Then the old woman from Iris Petal Peak cleared her throat and looked over at Li Qinghu. "Peak Lord Li, about what we were discussing earlier, do you think?" Li Qinghu shook his head slightly and said, "Were it not for this little mishap, I would have agreed. But this complicates matters. You're on your own now." With that he looked down at Bai Xiaochun's Immortal's cave, a faint smile on his face. The old woman glanced over at the Peak Lord from Sunset Peak, looking a bit frustrated. The Peak Lord from Sunset Peak sighed, well aware that the trouble had been caused by disciples from his own mountain peak. That meant that he had to resolve the situation. Plastering a smile onto his face, he looked down at Bai Xiaochun's Immortal's cave. "Junior brother Xiaochun." The words almost stuck in his mouth on the way out, but he managed to utter them. There was really no other choice. After some discussion, the North Bank leadership had come to the conclusion that Bai Xiaochun's aphrodisiac pill was of critical importance to them. After some further study of the battle beasts which had been affected, they realized that the pill could even affect first-order bloodlines. That virtually drove them crazy. To the North Bank, Bai Xiaochun's medicinal pill was almost like a holy relic. For various reasons, it was often difficult for some of the most powerful battle beasts to breed. There were even some first-order bloodline beasts that would only go into heat once every few dozen years, or even once in 100 years. That had been one of the most frustrating problems for the North Bank for years on end. A perfect example was the blue-eyed Nethermoon ape, one of Sunset Peak's 2 holy beasts. It was reaching the end of its lifespan, and still had not produced any offspring. It was a very critical situation. But then Bai Xiaochun came along with his heaven-defying medicinal pill, which the 4 peak lords of the North Bank were determined to acquire. Unfortunately for them, no amount of research led them to any description of the pill, and eventually they had no choice but to acknowledge that the pill had been invented by Bai Xiaochun. Afterward, they went to the sect leader and Li Qinghu to ask for it. If it were any other disciple, even an inner sect disciple, all they would have to do was express their desire, and it would be fulfilled. There were many ways to force such a disciple to obediently hand over the pill formula. But Bai Xiaochun was different. He was a prestige disciple, and with that status, they had no choice but to offer him compensation of some sort. Furthermore, without Bai Xiaochun's consent, they would never be able to get the pill. Forcing him to hand it over wasn't an option. The peak lords had all discussed the matter, and even agreed to some demands put forth by Li Qinghu. But before they could formalize the agreement, they got news that the Sunset Peak disciples had gone to cause trouble for Bai Xiaochun. The 4 peak lords from the North Bank were instantly enraged. Their biggest fear was that the Sunset Peak disciples wouldn't control themselves, and end up offending Bai Xiaochun, thus making it even harder for them to acquire his medicinal pill. And that was what had led to the current scene. "Junior brother Xiaochun, would you mind coming out to discuss something?" The peak lord from Sunset Peak did his best to seem as friendly as possible, keeping his voice calm and mild. The surrounding Sunset Peak disciples were shaking, and the Beihan siblings stood there wide-eyed, as mute as wooden chickens. Inside his immortal's cave, Bai Xiaochun looked up for a moment in thought. What was happening outside seemed odd, to say the least, especially considering the look in Li Qinghu's eyes. After a bit of thought, he couldn't pinpoint exactly what was happening, but he had some speculations. Finally, he spoke out in a bemoaning voice. "Those disciples of yours are too fierce. I just about lost my poor little life right now. I really don't dare to go out." The heartrending way he spoke caused a cold wind to creep up the backs of the Beihan siblings. As for the other Sunset Peak disciples, their faces flickered with various emotions. They could all see how seriously the 4 peak lords seemed to take Bai Xiaochun, and how ingratiating they were being. After hearing Bai Xiaochun's response, they could only imagine what fate was in store for them later. The faces of Li Qinghu and Zheng Yuandong twitched slightly, and the peak lord from Sunset Peak turned to glare angrily at his disciples before shouting, "Apologize to your sect uncle Bai immediately." Looking like they were about to cry, the Sunset Peak disciples immediately clasped hands in the direction of Bai Xiaochun's immortal's cave and apologized. In his grief and indignation, Beihan Lai was about to argue, but when he saw the fierce gleam in his master's eyes, he bowed his head and clasped his hands toward the immortal's cave. "Sect Uncle Bai. I apologize." Beihan Feng looked up sullenly at his master, only to find the look in the man's eyes growing sharper by the second. Heart trembling, veins bulging out on his forehead, he had no choice but to clasp hands and apologize. Everyone was left shaking and staring in anger at the immortal's cave. Trying very much to seem pleasant, the peak lord from Sunset Peak said, "Junior brother Xiaochun, how was that?" After a moment passed, an opening appeared in the spell formation, and Bai Xiaochun poked his head out. After looking around, he coughed dryly, then swaggered out, chin stuck up, looking as arrogant as ever. "Let bygones be bygones. As a member of the senior generation, I won't lower myself to bickering with these sect nephews." With that, he swished his sleeve. Beihan Lai stood there, eyes bloodshot, trembling violently. It looked as if he almost couldn't restrain himself from leaping forward and punching Bai Xiaochun in the face. However, he didn't dare to do such a thing. His elder brother Beihan Feng felt as if the world was spinning around him, as if he were about to go mad. The looks in their eyes angered Bai Xiaochun, who glared over at them fiercely. "Now who's afraid?" He thought. Not me. I'm not afraid of anybody. The Peak Lord from Sunset Peak took a deep breath. Voice calm, he said, Xiaochun, that aphrodisiac pill of yours. Did you create it yourself? As the words left his mouth, the other Peak Lords from the North Bank all looked down with anticipation gleaming in their eyes. The Beihan siblings' minds reeled as they suddenly realized what was happening. In their bitterness, their hatred for Bai Xiaochun grew even stronger. Bai Xiaochun blinked a few times as he also came to realize what was happening. Sticking his chest out, he nodded grandly. That's right. That mighty medicinal pill was created using a secret formula that I myself created. No one except for me can concoct it. The 4 Peak Lords' hearts swelled with joy, but they did their best to keep it from showing it on their faces. The Peak Lord from Sunset Peak smiled and nodded. Junior brother Xiaochun, he said in the most charming fashion possible. The fact that you were able to create a pill formula like that at such a young age shows that you truly deserve to be called chosen. That pill formula is of vital importance to the Spirit Stream sect. How about I offer you 100,000 merit points for it? What do you say? Junior brother Xiaochun, if you give that pill formula to the sect, it would be a great service. As a prestige disciple, our sect is your home, you know. Very well. Bai Xiaochun replied, looking as though he'd just gone through hell and high water for the sect. With that, he began to explain the pill formula to the 4 delighted Peak Lords. The ingredients are Brightburst Seed, Paradise Wood Flower, Spirit Winter Bamboo, and what else? How come I can't think of it? Could it be that I was so frightened just now that I forgot it? Bai Xiaochun stood there frowning in thought. Li Qingho's mouth twisted into a smile, and Zheng Yuandong shrugged helplessly. The 4 Peak Lords immediately realized what was happening, and smiled bitterly. The Peak Lord from Sunset Peak gritted his teeth and glared angrily over at his disciples. As his gaze passed over them, the Sunset Peak disciples, including the Beihan siblings, all shivered.